Hello, everybody. This is Chris from Felgar Productions, and we're back with another review. This one going away from the metal or plastic miniatures and taking a look at the world of 3D printed figures. And these are figures from Henry Turner of Turner Miniatures. He is releasing a new Kickstarter, Battleground 1940 Blitzkrieg, looking at the early years of World War II in a couple, kind of one scale, kind of a couple of different scales. So before we jump into what's going on here, just a disclaimer, Henry reached out to me and asked if I would like to do a review of these. I was sent these files for review. However, this is not sponsored. I'm not being compensated. My opinions are completely my own, and I'm able to say what I think about these figures. He just sent me the STLs and gave me some information about the Kickstarter that's coming out, so he could get the word out and so that I could tell you my honest thoughts about these. In the past, I have backed two of Henry's Kickstarters, his two Napoleonic Kickstarters. And if you know the name Henry Turner, then you probably know him either from his models, small scale, usually they're natively scaled for 6, and also recommend you can scale up to 10 or 15. Or you might also know him from his Patreon, where he does more models, and he also does naval ships of the, I believe, 15th, 16th, and maybe even 17th centuries. That look, I've never seen them in person, but I've seen them digitally, and they look fantastic. But we're focusing on this. And so let me just remind you of how my reviews go. I review models, either mostly focusing on small scale, and I categorize them in the reviews in quality of sculpts, cost, cleanup and assembly, paintability, and then finally miscellaneous, with quality of sculpts being worth 40% of the score, and then cost, cleanup and assembly, and then paintability being 20% with an occasional miscellaneous thrown in there. I also grade on an academic scale of A, B, C, D, F, and then the very rare A+ for something that truly blows me out of the water. And a reminder that a C is okay. A C is a solid, middle-of-the-road score. B is good, A is great, D, there's some significant flaws, and F is failure. So looking at these, I normally start with quality of the sculpts, but I'm actually going to start by talking about the prices, because the prices of these figures, this is a Kickstarter going live on, I believe it is Friday the 27th, as I double check that. Yes, it is Friday the 27th of September 2024. And that will be up for roughly a month. I don't have exact dates on that. But looking at this, I was sent some of the prices. So these are, I believe they are final prices, and there's a couple of options here. So if this Kickstarter is live, I might actually recommend that you head on over to the Kickstarter. I will put a link to the Kickstarter, as well as a My Mini Factory description of it in the description below. But there's going to be a couple different things. There's going to be 4 primary tiers, and that is the core STLs, which is going to contain all the German and British STLs, plus any stretch goals that are marked as core. And that is going to be 59 British pounds, or if you convert that into American dollars, that is, at the time of recording, approximately $79. Next is going to be the core blender files in STL. And I'll talk more about the blender files in a minute, because if you're used to just getting Kickstarters or buying files with STLs, the blender files are something extra that you can do more work to get more variety. That is going to be 85 pounds or $113 US approximately. After that, there's a all STL option, which contains the core STLs and the 2 World War II add-ons, which is vehicle and crew and artillery, that are discounted. That's also going to be 85 pounds or $113. And then finally, there's the everything blender files and core and add-ons and STLs, which is 110 British pounds or 146 US dollars. Now, if you just want to get the add-ons, there is an artillery STL add-on, there's a vehicle and crew STL add-on, and then there are the artillery STL and vehicle crew blender file add-ons, which are a little bit more. And again, you can take a look at that. But honestly, I think if you're going to be going for the add-ons, you probably just want to get one of the expanded backing options that are either $85 for everything STL or 85 pounds for everything STL or 110 pounds for everything blender files. Now, in terms of pricing STLs, there's not a lot of things to compare with, right? When I look at, for an example, Pendragon, which that is not Pendragon. Well, if I did look at Pendragon, I could look at what are the other 10 millimeter producers producing. If I'm looking at Bacchus, these are some Bacchus 6 millimeter Dark Ages figures. I could look at other 6 millimeter producers, but with STLs, yes, you can look at other STL producers. There aren't a ton of people doing small scale historical. And so, as far as I'm aware, there really aren't a lot of World War II, especially early World War II, small scale infantry. Off of the top of my head, the only other one I know of is the 3 Breed March to Hell line, and that is 15 and 28 millimeter, while this is 6, 10, or 15 millimeter. You can, of course, always scale up practically infinitely, but I wouldn't go bigger than 15. I'll talk more about that in the future. So looking at this and looking at the prices, I'm going to talk about some other producers to try to compare this. So for an example, one of my favorite 10 millimeter producers goes by the name of Forest Dragon. And Forest Dragon is well known for their 10 millimeter fantasy figures. And Forest Dragon stuff, you can buy an army pack for about $60. I think some of the larger army packs are $70, and they literally just have more figures in them. So an entire army for $60 or $70, and you're off to the races. Obviously, you need to print them, whereas the smallest of these packs, although technically is the British and the Germans, plus any possible stretch goals, which I don't want to talk too much about the stretch goals, but I've been told the French, early war French, are an early stretch goal. So that's likely, but I try not to buy things on the promise of stretch goals. So Force Dragon is $60. This is, again, for the cheapest, $79 for the core STLs, although that doesn't include the artillery or the vehicle and crew. So really, it's $113. So you're paying almost double. If you look at Cromarty Forge, who does a lot of great historicals, although not modern historicals, he does ancient historicals. His late Imperial Romans are 40 British pounds, about $55. So again, this is about double, but you're getting 2 armies in this. So I'm going to put that kind of on par with that. It's not phenomenally cheap. It's not expensive. I'm going to give that a solid B in the cost territory. Now, I'll remind you, this is for the Kickstarter. Once all these files are done and available to the backers, they will go up on my mini factory, as well as I think some other historical focused wargaming sites for STLs. And there, if I look at one of his more recent Kickstarters for World War I, you can then buy the files piecemeal, and the World War I, Great War, later war infantry for the Germans is a $15 purchase. For the British, it is a $12 purchase. I believe the British literally come with less options in there, whereas the Germans also have some options for anti-tank rifles and flamethrowers, hence the small price increase for the Germans because there's just more models in there. So it gets quite pricey if you're buying it outside of the Kickstarter. If you want to go in this, I'd say Kickstarter is a B. That's what I got for that. Then, usually I start with quality of sculpts. I'm going to look at quality of sculpts. So right here in front of you, I only have 4 figures, and normally I do more. For an example, here's some figures by Cromarty Forge, actually those late Romans I was talking about. I'll be reviewing those a little bit later. And you can see I have a bunch of them here, although this is also for a personal project. I'm not currently working on World War II, so I only print out a couple. One of the other reasons why I only print out a couple is I had a bit of a major print failure, and resin ended up on the screen, and my printer is currently in the process of being repaired, or things have been ordered to be repaired. So I only have these 4 figures. I have the exact same German with a submachine gun, I believe the MP40, and then a Brit with a Bren gun, who I didn't really paint because I think I'm going to get my points across with the Germans. But looking at the 6 is the native scale for these figures. That's what, if you just take the STLs and you put them into your slicer, that's what you get. Now, these are 6. These are 6 from Bacchus, and they are pretty similar. It has an integrated base, so it's a little hard to tell exactly if they're exactly the same size, but they're pretty close, and I've measured it. It's close enough. And then you've also got squatting and kneeling and even laying prone figures. And then over here we have a 10 millimeter, and this is a Cromarty Forge 10 millimeter. So also right on scale for 10 millimeters. Henry Turner also does a great job of providing video guides and text guides of how to scale his material. For example, here's the 15 millimeter, where he actually suggests scaling the vertical, the z-axis up more than the x and y-axis, so that they get kind of a less chubby look. And then this happens to be a random 15 millimeter Mexican-American war figure that I never finished that project, but you can see that as 15 millimeter, and this is according to his official scaling heights. So 6 millimeters, the true scale of these figures, 10's not that far off. I believe it was 140, 145% scaling. This is 200% taller, 190% wider and thicker. I'm going to give the quality of sculpts a C. And one of the reasons for that is, especially if you look at the 15 millimeter, they're quite stiff sculpts. And that isn't just this sculpt. You can look at the British. They're just quite stiff and almost two-dimensional. And there are other poses, obviously, out there. You can look and, in fact, download some sample STLs to print. But they're just quite stiff. They don't look particularly natural, especially if you compare it to some of the Cromartie Forge figures. Obviously, these are not super active figures. They're all standing straight up, but they just look a lot more natural looking, even in these relatively stiff poses. And then if you look at especially the faces on these figures, they're just kind of rough. They're a little rough by my standards, with just kind of a big nose and a chin, and there's not really eyes, although the helmet kind of hides it. And even these figures with the helmets, they have definition, and they just I honestly, I just think they look better. So I don't think these are bad. They really aren't. I want to say that they're not bad. They're okay. And I also think this is a problem that they're being sold as models in multiple scales. And with STLs, I generally think my rule of thumb is you can scale up by one step, so 6 to 10. And you can even sometimes scale down by one step, say 6 to 3 or 4 millimeters. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure if the submachine gun or the ankles would really survive that in this particular case. But I think when you go from 6 to 15, even though it's advertised that way, I don't think I would personally do that. So I would not really recommend this if you wanted to do 15 millimeter. There are lots of 15 millimeter World War II options out there, whether physical, like Flames of War Battlefront, or STLs, like March to Hell Rome, that are made natively for 15 millimeter and also 28, although I wouldn't recommend those for 28. I think that the quality of sculpts is a C. It's fine. It's solid, especially at 6 millimeter. In fact, if this was advertised just as 6 millimeter, I would probably give them a B, but I'm going to review them as advertised, which is 6 to 15. And there, I think it's trying to be kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. And it ends up trying to do too many things. That also gets into, I'm going to jump around a little bit more, and I'm going to jump to paintability, because I think it's similar to what I just said. The problem with the quality of the sculpts is jack of all trades, master of none. In the paintability, if you look at this 15 millimeter figure, and I've painted Germans at 28, I've painted them at 15, now I've painted them at pretty much every scale. Germans just had a lot of kit, especially in the early war. We've got some kind of metal tin, and then there's a bedroll, and then there's a gas mask canister, and then there's a bayonet, and then there's a canteen. Germans have a lot of kits, and it's very crowded back here. Now, on a 15 millimeter figure, I thought painting it was fine. On a 10 millimeter figure, I thought painting it was a bit of a pain because it's tiny and they're all very cramped together. And on a 6 millimeter character, I was kind of annoyed that I had to paint all of this. And that's the sort of area where on Bacchus figures or a lot of metal figures, the detail is just simplified and they just leave things off that you're not going to see. Like the bayonet, not holster, the bayonet sheath. It's there because it needs to be there, because it needs to be scaled all the way up to 15 millimeter where you can see it, and even 10 where you can see it. But on 6, it's there, and if you look, I did paint it, but I didn't want to. The bedroll just could have been dropped, or maybe the canister on top. There's just too many details on the Germans. Now, the Brits, that's a little better because they just had less kit, but it's kind of a pain. And so for paintability, I'm going to give it a C. Also, because there's not a lot of deep recesses, there are in some areas, like obviously like where the arms are and behind the guns, but not in the face. So if you want to paint these with washes, it's not a great choice, I don't think. It works, but it's not like these Cromartie Forge figures where the wash flows just beautifully into all the little nooks and crannies. and obviously chainmail is not a thing in World War II, but it works, I think, better in that case. So I'm going to give these for paintability a C. Again, not a bad score. It's okay. They work. They're not great. They're definitely not bad. I would put this on the table. If I was doing a 6mm World War II project, I'd put this on the table. But I think there is better out there. Finally, I think the best thing about these is cleanup and assembly, because they're designed to be not zero supports, although there are some figures that are zero support, but very low support. I believe these figures only printed with two supports, one for the magazine and one for the tip of the submachine gun, and the Bren gun was very similar. I believe there, in fact, for the Bren gun, I think there was maybe only one support. I don't remember. And so in terms of cleanup and paintability, practically zero. That's a solid A. Those are great. There's just not much to them, so they're very easy to clean up and get painting. Now, there is a miscellaneous here, although it's going to be a miscellaneous that I'm not going to give a score to, because I think whether this miscellaneous is a good or a bad thing really depends on what you want out of these figures, and that is the options I mentioned before of the Blender files. So with the Blender files, Blender is well, it's a lot of things. It's a program that you can do 3D modeling and I believe also animation in. I have dabbled with it in the past and then immediately uninstalled it because it's kind of hard to use if you don't know what you're doing. But Henry Turner, if you buy the core Blender file or the all STL Blender file and STL packs, you get not only the pre-exported STLs, but you also get these Blender file packs, which allow you to go in and with all the figures, you can basically turn on and off options. So my complaint that there's too much going on back here, you could basically go in back here and uncheck a box. Apologies for that. And uncheck a box, and all of a sudden the thing disappears. Or you change the helmet for a field cap or something like that. You can even, there's cross compatibility between all of his lines. If you have his Napoleonics line, you could theoretically start putting tricorn hats on your Germans and do some real crazy alternate history stuff, or MP40s on your old guard, and boy, that would be interesting. So if you're someone who has the time and the energy and the knowledge, which Henry Turner puts out great YouTube tutorials about how to use Blender. You don't really need to know how to use Blender to create things. He teaches you how to use his Blender files to digitally kit bash all of his things, which are all compatible with each other. You can do a lot with that. I have the Blender files for the Napoleonics, and that allows me to, again, if I wanted to, and if I had the time and energy, to kit bash almost theoretically infinite imaginations, or to do similar early 19th century things, such as the wars of Spanish-American independence, using all those Napoleonic stuff. You could do a lot of interwar or World War II countries that maybe are digital kit bashes very easily, but it does require effort. And I think for most people that effort is not going to be worth it, and therefore buying the Blender files is not worth it. If you're someone who says, yeah, I absolutely want to do Romanians, how do I do World War II Romanians? This might be the answer for you. But I don't think that's something most people are looking for. So in the miscellaneous, I put the Blender files as not a score, because if that's what you want, then you know who you are. And if that's not what you want, then you're probably just going to ignore it. And it's not a downside because you don't have to pay for it. So that leaves us with, in my usual order, quality of sculpts is an OKC. Cost is a solid B for the Kickstarter. Cleanup and assembly is a great A, and then paintability is an okay C, leaving us to an average of a B+. And I think really this comes down to they're B+ models. They're solid models. They're good. They fall in the good category. But do you need these? If we compare this to metal, if I compare this, let's say the 6mm, to Bacchus. If I go on Bacchus' website, you can get the World War II box set, which includes a British infantry company, a German infantry company, bases for both sides, 3 ruined buildings, and a copy of the O Group rule set for 105 British pounds. Now, that is a little bit more expensive than this Kickstarter, whereas if you just got all of the STLs, that'd be 85 British pounds, although it also comes with a rule book and a little bit of terrain, so let's call it roughly a wash. But then you can print theoretically infinite of these. So compared to the figures in a Bacchus box set, or if you just bought those figures independently from Bacchus or Pendragon or wherever, if you want as infinite as many 6 or 10 millimeter World War II figures as you could possibly want to print, then I think this is a very good deal for you, especially at 6 and 10 millimeter, where the quality of sculpts matters significantly less. I would happily put these 6 or 10 millimeters on my table. I personally would not put these 15 millimeters on this table. And again, if this was only advertised as 6 or 10 millimeter, I think I'd say quality of sculpt is big, but the 15 drags it down a little bit. And then, of course, the opposite problem is by trying to put the details in for 15, there's too many details for 6. So, jack of all trades, master of none. Do you want this? Only you can answer that. Would I personally back this if I had a early World War II project in mind? I think the answer is yes. I think I would. And I have backed Henry's projects in the past for Napoleonics. And one day I intend to actually use them, which is not Henry's fault. That's a me fault for not going through with the project I had planned. So that's what I have to say. And I want to also thank Henry for his hard work in supporting the historicals community of STLs, because he is doing a lot of these. And I think that's also one of the trade-offs in slightly lower quality sculpt, but you get a lot of variety. You get a lot of options, and you get a lot of extra options out there that just otherwise we'd be going to Bacchus or Pendragon, or, well, there's tons of 15 millimeter options, but more choice is always better choice. And I think Henry fills a niche out there that other companies don't. And I would use that for 10 or 6. I wouldn't use it for 15, but I would absolutely 100% use it for 10 or 6. So I hope this review has been helpful. I hope you haven't just been staring at my hands the entire time. And again, go ahead and at least check out the Kickstarter. Take a look at some of the renders so you can see the models that I couldn't print because my printer is kaput right now. And you can take a look at them, and you can even download the free test prints and try them out and see if you like them in front of you. Because I can show you these on the screen, and small figures are hard to film sometimes. But you can take a look at them and say, you know what? That Chris guy's crazy. This stuff's great. I like it. And if that's what you want, if you like them, you're not wrong. If you like them, you like them. I can't say anything about that. I'm not even saying I don't like them. But that's it for me. I hope this was helpful, and I hope everyone goes out there and enjoys the rest of their day and has some good time printing and playing.